Hey, this is Studmuffin 1986 here. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm actually doing a tips and tricks video on heavy tanks today by way of recommendation from, and I apologize if I pronounce this wrong, AXMill. He had commented. Love the comments that I've been getting, some conversation on my previous videos, and want to show that the comments do matter, and when you do message me, I want to be able to make videos around that. Alright, so heavy tanks. So heavy tanks are very much so different than any other types of tanks. And every type of heavy tank, you also have to keep in mind, just like my tips and tricks videos on medium tanks, they're also very different from each other, and they have their own playing style, and you have to understand that not all heavy tanks are played the same way, not all medium tanks are played the same way, and etc. And a lot of it comes down to paying attention and looking at the stats, the strengths and weaknesses of the tank, and just fully understand your tank, because when you do understand your tank more, you know how to utilize those strengths more and then try to protect against exposing your weaknesses more. So with heavy tanks, the whole purpose of them is to be able to be on the front lines, applying pressure, side scraping, bouncing rounds, and doing what a lot of other tanks cannot do. Medium tanks, light tanks, most tank destroyers cannot fulfill that role of applying pressure, because if they are in situations where they are against someone in a heavy tank that knows really how to utilize the strong points of their armor, there's really not a whole lot the enemy can do about them. And when you're so closely engaged with them and you're brawling, they just get completely ripped apart. Whether it's through ramming and side scraping, bouncing their shells, and you just putting in rounds one after another into the enemy, heavy tanks can be very, very lethal. So that's one of the biggest things, and I'll give you an example. The differences between the EXP, the mutant tank, the tier 8 premium, versus a tank like the IS-3. For example, the IS-3 has much better side scraping capability compared to the EXP. When you look at the armor profile, and if you're not 100% confident or sure what the strong points of your armor are, I recommend downloading the Armor Inspector app, or go to the Blitz hangar and look at the armor, and that'll give you an idea, comparatively, against who you're playing with, what enemy tanks are looking at when they're facing you. You can change the different shell types, because some shells have better penetration than other, and you really have to understand the rules of penetration and armor pretty well to know how to play with a heavy tank most effectively. And so heavy tanks have armor weaknesses in different places than other heavy tanks. And so where, like the EXP, for example, when you're coming out or around a corner, it's typically best because the front slope of the armor and the turret has so much good armor that when you come out angled frontally and turn your cannon to get shots, it's actually much more effective than trying to side scrape in the EXP, because the side armor of the EXP is like butter. Not necessarily meaning you can't do it at all, but it is it's much harder to do in a tank like the EXP because your armor's so weak. However, when you're looking at a tank like the IS-3 and you're side scraping, you do have much better side scraping ability armor. The armor on the sides is a lot thicker and a bit more reliable. So understanding the armor of your tank is really important. The second thing, and this also went along with my tips and tricks video with medium tanks, is understanding your gun depression. Because with a heavy tank, and just with tanks in general, tanks that don't have good gun depression, I've seen players try to come up over hills trying to get that cannon down when it just can't, and they'll just basically sacrifice themselves to go completely over the hill to get one shot off, and they'll trade one shot into an enemy in exchange for getting themselves almost deleted because they're way too out in the open. Just because you're a heavy tank doesn't mean you're invincible. You still have those weak links in your armor, and you still want to be utilizing cover to bounce those shots and so forth. So gun depression can be very, very useful to understand. And typically when you have a tank that has really good gun depression, it's better to utilize that type of tank in areas where there are hills, to utilize and go in spots where you are forced to put your cannon down. And heavies that don't have good gun depression, you want to go around hills or stay mostly on flat ground, angling your tanks, because those tanks they don't have that advantage that tanks with good gun depression have. So that'll help you not only utilize your armor the best way, but it'll also keep your gun in a position to always be able to have your enemy in your sights. And so now the other thing, like I said, all heavies aren't made the same in understanding the armor specs. But as odd as this may sound, there's even some heavy tanks, and this is more rare than common, but there's even some heavy tanks that are better to be played more like a medium tank than a heavy tank. Even though they're classified as a heavy tank, they can't be played like a heavy, primarily because what trumps that reason is because of their armor specs. And I'll give you an example, like the tier 10 or tier 9 French heavy tank. It doesn't have the armor to be able to compete with a lot of other heavy tanks on the front line. And it's got good maneuverability, and by understanding the specs of the tank, you almost want to play with it more like a medium tank. And so understanding the specs of the tank will give you a better understanding of how to play it. Just because it's a heavy tank doesn't necessarily mean you need to be playing it on the front line. So number one, understanding your tank's armor strength and weaknesses will help you understand how to utilize that armor. Number two, understand your tank's gun depression and how to best utilize that gun depression. Both of which, if you combine those two, you know how to protect your weak spots and best position your heavy tank. And number three is being on the front lines, knowing how to apply pressure. With most heavy tanks being able to do this, because you can gain more territory and more ground. As a heavy tank, you can do this where most other tanks can't. Another thing that's important to understand with a heavy tank is at the beginning of the game, you want to make sure that you're always within view range of where your teammates are. You don't want to go completely solo as a heavy tank. Even though you do have good armor, mediums, lights you're very prone to getting circle of death and raced around. And as long as you keep within the sights of your teammates can help you. And so at the beginning of the game, your lights and mediums are doing the spotting. You're moving with your team. Your tank destroyers are most of the time in the background giving support. And so as a heavy tank, you're not really in a position to be completely going solo, but you want to make sure that not only are you applying pressure, but you also have support from your destroyers as you are moving forward to engage, to help protect you against being circle of death or raced around. Because when you have that team support, you can be much more effective. You can apply that pressure and know you can't get flanked or circled of death, because if they do, your team can just crush them and delete them. So to sum everything up, number one is understanding your tank role, which is you need to be on the front lines applying pressure most of the time. And a lot of that depends on number two, the specs of your tank, understanding the specs, your armor of the tank, your strengths and weaknesses, knowing how to protect those weaknesses and how to utilize those strengths with the armor. Number three is knowing how to utilize your tank's gun depression. Does your tank have gun depression so that you could peek and come up over hills and get your cannon down and take shots? Or do you need to stay on flat ground and come around bends or hills, buildings to be able to keep your cannon so you can always keep targets in your sights? Number four is make sure that you're always within view range of your team. Tank destroyers in positions, most likely behind you or with you to support you, medium tanks flanking or spotting, just somewhere, or even just other heavy tanks, even kind of around you. Being completely alone and trying to apply pressure just does not work. So hope this helps. Once again, this is Heavy Tanks Tips and Tricks by Stud Muffin 1986, and keep tanking.